Mhm.
Welcome to another episode of the Limitless Life podcast. I am your host, Kyle Smith. And if you have not done so, hit that subscribe button so that you never miss another podcast. And if you love this podcast and want some more tips and tricks on how to improve yourself, go ahead and subscribe to my YouTube channel. There are a ton of instructional videos there. You can find the link below. But for today, my guest is the one, the only, Bryan Buendia. Welcome to the show, my man.
Thank you. Great to be here. We've had a great little conversation so far, so I'm very excited to get into this conversation and hear what questions you have lined up for me.
Absolutely, my man. So let's get into it. Can you give us a little introduction? Tell us a story about you, my man.
Yes. So I am Bryan Buendia. I am the creator of the comic book channel, uh, the YouTube channel Comic Breakdown. And essentially, what I do is go over the comic, do an abridged version, abridged telling of the story for you guys, and then from there we jump into my critiques, my likes, my analysis, a summary of how I felt the comic went, how I thought the artwork was, um, and my predictions on where the story might go. Um, and there's a lot more to me. But this is where I'm currently out in life, and this is what I've been doing. And yeah, it's definitely been one heck of an adventure so far.
Yeah, man, it's been sweet. And for folks, this guy has got me through so many long work days. It's absolutely mind-boggling. I just have like the phone right there. I'm getting some typing done. It's like admin stuff. So it's just like, oh my gosh, my brain, right? So I'm just like doing some shit and then I'm just watching comic book breakdowns. So I'm still up to date, but instead of just purchasing it and reading it, I got this man right here to do it for me.
Yep. Yep. And the intent's not necessarily to push people away from buying the comic. I do it so there was a lot of kids like me growing up that were, poor, that are out there that can't buy comics, or people can't get access to comics, or they bought the comic and they don't want to open up their comic because they want to keep it in a sleeve and keep it protected because they think it might be valuable one day. And so this is for all of those people, or the people that might be interested in reading a comic and wanting to maybe see the first issue, how it plays out, and then they'll invest into it later. Actually, there was someone, I think we're on Punisher issue number 10 now, since the Punisher symbol has been changed. And there have been people holding out just because of the Punisher symbol changing. And I have been harping on it every single issue. And there was someone in the comments yesterday that was talking about that they are now going to invest in getting the series, that they were one of the people that had an issue with the symbol, but that the telling of the story from what I was doing was significant enough to get them to change their mind and go out and buy the comic. And that's exactly the kind of stuff that I aim to do.
Yeah, dude, I would definitely agree. Like I remember and folks, like it's a insane amount of videos I've watched of this. I'm probably up there for like top viewership for sure. But like that was what he said was absolutely great. Like the Punisher symbol change was got so many people fired up, and it was so
So many.
silly because the story is just really freaking it's savage,
Hmm.
and freaking the Punisher is OP as fuck.
Hmm.
But damn, dude, like you're totally right about that, man. So how is it that because I'm sure you weren't recording YouTube videos from the beginning of the YouTube. So
Yeah.
how'd you get into it, dude?
Yeah, so originally it was something I started, I think it was 2020, so the pandemic was more or less underway. It was getting to where we were starting to have restrictions and stuff of that nature. Um but I was medically retired already. So I didn't I served in the military for 4 years. I was Army infantry. Um did a year in Iraq, and so I think my medical retirement date was like 2017. So since 2017, I really didn't have to do anything. So I would sit around, I would watch Comic Story, and I would watch Comics Explained, uh, Blurred Without Fear. I would watch all of these comic reviewers, and this is where I would intake most of my comic information, that in cinema and film and things of that nature. Eventually, it got to a point where Comic Explained and comic historians weren't covering specific comics. And so, you know, me not really having anything to do at the time, I saw an opportunity that was there and it was open, an option to fill the gap of the comics and content that wasn't already being made, and to a quality and quantity that would really have a significant impact and be able to get some views.
Yeah, man, that's freaking sweet. So you said you recognize that there was an opportunity. How would you, if you were to articulate how you found or came across that opportunity to someone else that was looking for an opportunity, how would they find one?
I would say that there's a niche group of for everything. Um, what was it, an Alan Watts quote saying that find something that you love doing, and I promise you that you will find others that love doing it as well, and from that you can build and so on and so forth. And I think that's true for everything. There's a niche group for everything. How many people are actually into comics in a population of 300 million people? You have the casual comic observer that goes to the movies, but that's actually wanting to know what's going on in the comics. It's very hard to get people to go over to the comics from a film aspect, because a film they can sit down for 2.5 3 hours, or if it's TV show, sit down for an hour a week and watch it, versus going to the comic shop and trying to keep up with the lines of what's coming out. It takes true comic fans to truly buy every single week and keep up with it and follow these stories. And so man, I don't know where I was going with that. Sorry, rambling.
Oh, it's all good,
Um,
man. I dig it.
no, but what your original question was, how would you find that? And I would just say
Yeah.
find your niche group. Find whatever it is out there. If you like basket weaving, if you like, interviewing people like you do, if you like working out, find a way to there's 1,000 workout channels, but find your own unique way of doing it. It may not be successful, but you don't know until you try. And from what I've learned when it comes to YouTube channels, is it's just persistence. You keep putting out content, eventually something is going to hit. And then that's what's going to help propel you, get more viewers. They can go back to your previous content and move forward going that way.
That's pretty sweet. That was an awesome answer. And I wanted to really make sure I wanted to pull out because I'm also thinking of okay, what can I ask you selfishly so
Mhm.
that I could get some tips?
Yeah.
So that was absolutely fantastic. So that
Yes,
actually,
I went in
yeah,
with, so when I started the YouTube channel, I went in with the notion that it could take me 8 years to be successful. That this is something that I have to stay persistent and consistent out. And the last tip is one that I had read. I can't even remember where I read it, but when I was researching on making a YouTube channel, the best tip I got was to constantly try to make your channel better, whether it's the smallest of tweaks or something drastic, or same to go with the thumbnails and everything else, until you get to a point where you're like, what, I feel like this is really grabbing people's attention. And so that, like, those small things, just focus on one small thing every episode until you get to a point where you're like, what, I don't know if there's much I can improve, but always look for something to improve on. And eventually the quality of your videos will go up. Like, you'll go back to mine. My very first video is absolutely horrible. No good. Like, I hate listening to them. Part of me wants to delete them all, but it's part of my back catalog. People can go back and see where I started versus where I am now. And it just takes time. It just takes time.
that's pretty sweet. So you mentioned in there where it's just persistence, consistency, and the YouTube channel will just grow and grow and grow. And
Yes.
then it's making those fine tweaks to improve it, right?
Yes.
So that brought up a thought on that one. How have you grown as a person in, let's say, your health, your relationships, your joy? How have you grown as a person as your channel has grown?
So I started out the channel mostly just because it was selfish reasons. I wanted Comic Story wasn't covering the Flash comics. So I thought maybe I should just make a YouTube channel covering the Flash comics. And then I was like, oh, maybe I could reach more people if I'm doing something else. So I started branching out and eventually it got to the point where it's okay, I'm just covering all comics. And that's something that a lot of people were doing. Indie comics weren't being covered. So I was trying to figure out the best avenue to do all of this. And um, like I said, it started out with for selfish reasons, but eventually it got to a point where, this is something I enjoy. People were enjoying the content. And I started to see people how it affected their lives. Not just in an entertainment sense, but people saying, I'm going through a very hard time right now, and your videos, I'm watching them day in and day out, and they help keep me sane. Whether they're fighting depression or they're dealing with a death in the family. There's been multiple scenarios where I've had somebody comment something like that, and then I realized like how much of an impact something as simple as a comic book YouTube channel could actually have. And so, in the sense that I've grown, I had no intentions of being somebody that could be there for somebody just by telling a story of a comic. But now that I see that, I definitely am humbled by that, and I take this YouTube channel not necessarily in just an aspect to where it's a hobby for me, but something that I feel like almost an obligation to do because I want to help people be able to have these stories and deal or not deal but escape from at least temporarily for 15 minutes, escape from whatever they're dealing with in their life, and just be engulfed in this fantasy of DC or Marvel comics.
Nice. Yeah, it's like a little like a reprieve from the chaos.
Yes, 100%.
Nice, nice. Okay, I definitely got a pretty important question on this one. What is your favorite comic book? And
Mm-hmm.
there's specifics on this one. One for indie, one for Marvel, and one for DC. And a little
Okay.
synopsis of why.
Okay.
Spoiler alert, just in case. I'm just joking.
Let's see. My favorite comics indie wise is gonna have to probably be Noctera, the
Okay.
Scott Snyder comic. I don't know if you've been following along that one.
Yeah.
Um, that one, I think from the very first issue, I was like, this deserves a movie. It deserves a TV show. It reminded me right off the bat of Pitch Black. If you saw that movie with Vin Diesel, that's exactly what I am such a fan of post-apocalyptic worlds though. Like that is my stuff. I am there day in and day out for a post-apocalyptic world. And so any story that follows along those lines, I am 100% on board. This one just takes it to a whole nother level where human beings are being turned into shades which are essentially monsters that just eat and destroy and kill everything, and the world is covered in darkness, and that there's no sunlight, it's completely blocked out, and you're having convoys of truckers that are going from location to location of people that are the last resistance of humanity. And now there comes a point where there's a possibility that they could bring back the sun.
Shit. Yeah, that's freaking sweet.
I'm on board 100%.
Yeah, yeah.
I think it's on issue 12 counting one shots. I think there's like 14 issues of it out, and it's a Scott Snyder comic, and it's just so absolutely phenomenal. I love it. It's the best indie to me right now that's coming out.
Nice.
If you had asked me a year ago, I would have told you The Last Ronin.
Mhm.
But that's over now. So current ongoing, I would say Noctera. If I'm going to say overall, I would say The Last Ronin just because of how beautifully done it was. DC Comics. Uh, I'm gonna have to say The Flash. I have been loving the 1 Minute War, but overall, The Flash is my favorite DC character. It's one of the reasons I started the YouTube channel to begin with. So that's more of a bias thing. I've loved the Flash ever since I was a kid, and that's just you know, it's my DC character.
What is it about the Flash?
Uh, I don't feel like I necessarily relate to him in any way. I just love the idea of super speed. If
Mm,
I were to have any power or ability, it would definitely be super speed. I love the idea of being able to run that fast and be in anywhere I want. If I wanted to be in Paris in 5 seconds, I can be. And to me, that's the ultimate.
sick.
Next to like teleportation. You know what I mean?
Teleportation is
Yeah.
my number one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Kendra and I talk about it all the time. And
Yeah.
I specifically, I wouldn't want it to be Nightcrawler teleportation. That's too sketchy.
Yeah.
But I would want to go with like Blink style. Like I
Yeah.
want to
Okay.
have the like the tunnel. I want to have
Or
like
or do it like Manifold.
yeah.
Manifold can teleport anywhere in the universe pretty much just by asking the universe.
Yeah, that's so crazy. Like that's
It's
a fucking
such
crazy one.
such a unique ability. But
I
yeah,
really
so
like that character too. Yeah.
he's an awesome character. And so Marvel Comics, my favorite comic, um my favorite comic or my favorite character?
Comic and then
Com
character.
okay. For Marvel, there's a lot of favorite characters. Emma Frost is definitely at the top of that list. Just because she's so badass and she's also so beautiful.
Yeah.
And they do such a great job of making her a strong, feminine woman who just doesn't take any BS and is just sexy as hell while doing it.
Yeah.
Um,
Shine
and
bright like a diamond.
she's a yeah, straight up, and she's a conqueror. At the end of the day,
That's true.
she's a titan of industries, and she can be up there with all the top dogs, and she can smash them down. And I think it's an absolutely brilliant, and it has nothing to do with her powers.
Mhm.
It has
Yeah,
nothing.
exactly.
She just also happens to have powers. And I think that's one of the things that makes her really unique. If I, if God, my favorite comic, it's really hard to say. My favorite character is Captain Marvel. She is always I've always liked the idea of Marvel, and but I've always liked the female Captain Marvel. Betsy Braddock takes a close
Mm.
second. Um, my favorite comic ongoing though is probably Sins of Sinister. If I'm gonna like it's so I would say, the whole X-Men line as a whole, because what's going on with Beast and Wolverine right now inside the Wolverine comics is absolutely phenomenal. Um
Mm.
I read in a headline that Kid Omega will be returning to X-Force in issue number 41, which is in like 3 months, which is a huge relief because I've been wondering where he is in every single comic, and now he is finally returning. So I'm excited for that. The X
He's
Men are
like
just
he's like that for me, he's like the asshole that's like, fuck, I just have no choice. I don't like you, but I like you.
yeah. So the X Men are just
Uh,
doing so good right now, and so the whole X-Men line, but Sins of Sinister, I think, is an absolutely great idea. Sinister has been an amazing character and shown that even given the option of redemption, he's still going to do what he wants to do. And
Crazy.
especially with people like Apocalypse no longer around to put that kind of stuff into check and stop this from happening. Um, Xavier's been kind of off the wall lately himself, and so it's just, it's so intricate. And, people have asked me where, if I wanted to start reading X-Men, like, where do I start? And I'm like, man, like, can I jump in anywhere? I'm like, you can, but it's going to be so hard to jump into these comics. Like, you really need to start at the beginning with the House and Powers. Like,
Mm.
that's where you really need to start reading the X-Men if you want to understand this story in its full entirety.
Yeah, that's legit. I actually have a question. I had this question in mind before, but then you mentioned that you actually didn't get into comics until like 2017, really. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm a comic book reader from a young age where I was
Yeah.
actively getting them and stuff. And you're like, you're a fresh comic book reader. You're
Yes.
like, oh, comic
Mhm.
books are cool now. I'm gonna hop on.
Yeah. Yeah, I've actually talked to, not too many people ask how long I've been reading comics, and that's why you'll see that I make mistakes here and there. Is because I'm relatively new to the comic book world. When I was a kid, I couldn't afford comics, and we lived in a very small town, so there wasn't comic book shops anywhere nearby. Um, so there was no way besides the animated shows. I didn't really have any other way of consuming comic content. Um, and then I grew up. I joined the military. I got busy with life. I had kids. I got married. I got divorced. So there was never a time where I was just like, I should go out and buy comics. It was like I'm preoccupied with life. I really don't have time for comics, but I'll go watch the movies when I have the opportunity. And then once I was able to get medically retired and stuff of that nature, I was able to relax more and sit down and started consuming more content. And then I started picking up comics, the hits, Kingdom Come and Crisis on Infinite
Mm.
Earths and all the big comics that you probably should read that have been the ones that ring out throughout the last couple decades. So I started picking up the ones that are essential reading, I would call it. And then when I decided to start the YouTube channel, most of these comics that I started covering, I had never bought one of their comics before. I hadn't bought a Punisher comic until I started the comics. I had, but I have gone back and I've read, many things about the Punisher, and now I've gone back and read Punisher comics. But when I first started the channel, I had never read a Punisher comic. And so, I went back and I read, I did more my history to learn the characters better. And so I have a better understanding of where they were versus where they are today.
Mm.
But I do try to critique. I don't try to base anything off the past because there's decades of content that I have to consume, and I'm one person. You know what I mean? Like I can only read so many comics while also keeping up with everything that is also coming out. Like I told you earlier, I read last year 800 comics in the year, and that was mostly new comics. So on top of that, I'm also having to go to the comic store and pick up some hard copies of some older stuff that might be interesting, or a storyline that I might find interesting, or something that I might want to know about. Um, so yeah, it's definitely been a learning experience for me as well, just because I've learned these characters and I've learned about these characters in such unique ways that I never really understood or had experienced before, but now I have grown to connect with so many of the characters. And granted, there's characters that I still have yet to learn about fully. Um, but I'm usually not covering those, especially like if it's something that I just really don't know about. I may not cover the comic just because I'm like, I don't know anything about this comic, and I just don't want to make a fool of myself trying to cover this.
Yeah, that's totally legit, dude. That's funny. I think the Last Ronin would definitely be up there on my favorites, and that is where Michelangelo, the youngest, the youthful, the the kid that just was the goofball, then became the freaking most serious person on the freaking planet. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was crazy. I'm not sure if you knew this, but I just learned this. This is just a fun fact that I learned like 2 weeks ago. But it was talking about the characters,
Hmm.
and it was talking about how the weapons that they have are very opposite to their personalities.
That
So
makes
like
sense.
so like Michelangelo, and correct me if I get the turtles wrong, and if I do, I'm sorry. But Michelangelo, he's like the most like wiry person, but he
Hmm.
has the nunchucks, which requires the most control,
It does.
right? Uh Raphael has such like an aggressive personality, and he wants to beat the shit out of everyone, but he has the most defensive weapons.
It is.
And then obviously Leonardo,
Hmm.
swords. It's just like freaking, you have to have wisdom to know when to take something out that's so powerful. It takes self-control,
Hmm.
right? So it's cool. So it's like the most powerful weapons with the most level-headed person. And then Donatello, did I get it all right?
Yeah.
So he's
Hmm.
really tech-based, right? But he has a wooden stick as his main weapon. Isn't
Yeah,
that
it makes
so
sense.
cool?
Yeah. And that's one thing like we were talking about a little bit ago is how the Turtles, like the new series, the continuation, but also the prequel to the Last Ronin, whereas following Michelangelo through his lost years after he lost his whole family and he was wandering through Japan and going all over the world. But it's also following Casey Marie Jones, which is the daughter of Casey Jones and April. Um, and so I really can't believe that it's not getting more viewership because these stories are absolutely amazing, and it's all by Kevin Eastman. Like he is the one that is controlling all of this. I've heard people complain that it's like woke because Casey Marie. Even someone called her a Mary Sue, and I was just
Mm.
like, what are you talking? What are you talking about? Um, it's just people get into a mentality and like the last Ronin videos were getting 20 to 50,000 views. It was one of the biggest comics that I had on the channel at the time. And the last Ronin Lost Years, it's barely breaking 6,000 views, and so it's quite shocking to see the difference. But I think the prequel, the Lost Years, are definitely worth investing in and checking out because it is a nice story and it is telling an in depth experience of what Mikey had gone through while his brothers had died and he believed that he had nobody left around.
That's totally legit. I've actually didn't notice that people are saying like make Casey Marie was like a Mary Sue. I would definitely use the story that's going on right now because she's learning how to be the mentor, right?
Yeah.
I think that that's a very strong case to say
And
that she's
she's
not a Mary
failing.
Sue.
She's not very good at it. She's not
Yeah,
great at it. Like she's
yeah,
trying to read out of the book and trying to learn how to be the mentor, to be the sensei, and she's like having trouble keeping them in check. I mean, granted, they're very young turtles. You know what I mean? The new turtles, and so they're pretty much toddlers. 5 years old. You imagine that age, and that's what she's dealing with. So it's gonna have so much trial and error. And exactly, it's an exact opposite of Mary Sue. Like the only difference is she has a little bit of enhanced power because her mother and father spent so much time with the turtles that the mutation caused her to be having a mutation when she came out at birth.
yeah, totally. So when you first started your YouTube channel, what were your did you have any concerns or were you resistant to it for any reason or fearful?
Not really. I mean, I didn't. There was nothing to lose in it. Like the worst case scenario, the channel didn't do successful. But for me, like I said, it may take me 8 years. I went in with the mentality that this is going to take me a decade to complete. And after a decade, if it wasn't successful, then I can have a discussion with myself on if it's something I want to continue doing. Um, but as it stands, I continue to put out better quality and better quantity. I try to make sure I'm always hitting my deadlines for myself that I put into place. And so I don't see it as anything that was necessarily anything to be fearful of or anything of that nature. It was just something that it was like I wanted to do it. I enjoy reading comics. I would like to get into them more. This helped me definitely dive into the hobby more. And now I read on a daily basis. I'm not reading novels, but I'm reading, 5 or 6 different comics a day. And I enjoy it. They're great. There's some great stories out there. I mean, how how could you ask for a better life than that? You know what I
Yeah. Were you
mean?
just chilling, doing your thing?
Just
Yeah,
chilling,
just
doing my
vibing.
thing at home, hanging out with my dog and my turtle, reading comics, have my kids come over when I have visitation, like living the best life I can.
Yeah, I think that's sweet, dude. So when you well, I forget what we were talking about, but I made a note of it here. But I don't know, it just stuck out. You were talking at some point where you said the words together, which they're not usually together, but I just thought it was cool and I just wanted to make a note of it. But tragically beautiful.
Yes.
Was that like the first time you said that before? Because that is like such an epic combination of words that
No,
it feels like it's something you use often.
so it is something I use often.
Yes, yes.
I I So I see myself somewhat as a poet. I don't have anything like published or anything like that, but I have loved doing poetry ever since I was a kid. I've been infatuated and in love with poetry. I love art and the artist world as a whole. I not a very good drawer. I can't really color that well when it comes to like professional coloring. Um, so you know,
You could at
there's
least hang out in the lines.
yeah, exactly. I can draw in the lines and we're good. You know, I can maybe add a little bit of darkness to
Mm.
this spot here, but it's not going to be nowhere near on the quality to be competing with any of these professionals out here. You know, I never learned any instruments because my family is poor and couldn't afford any. So, you know, I always had the heart of an artist. I would write poetry. I've wrote so much poetry and lost so much poetry that I couldn't even tell you about. So, I like to extend my vocabulary, and I like to try to use my words with some purpose. And I think we were talking about the Last Ronin and the story as itself, and I think that's one of the best ways to describe that story is tragically beautiful because it is
Mm.
so beautifully told, but it is such a tragic story. It is so depressing. It is so sad, but you want to keep reading and it's because it's so well told throughout the from issue number 1 to issue number 5. Your heart is just falling out of your chest with sadness the entire story because of what he is going through. That you can truly connect with Michelangelo even though he is a mutated turtle. That's great storytelling if I've ever heard it.
That's legit, dude. I think going with what we were talking about before as well is we have it's the combination of the novelty of growing up with the
Yes.
original TMNT
Hmm.
and then seeing the epicness and the difficulty that Mikey's going through like in the future.
Hmm.
It definitely has that dichotomy, or not even that dichotomy, but it has that like it's a great story for life.
Yeah. Yeah,
It is
100%.
so cool.
Yeah, and it's Michelangelo is why it's so impactful. And because he, you know, like we had talked about, he is the happy, the go lucky, the outgoing, the goofy, the joking, the fun brother that's always there to cheer you up with a big old slice of pizza and joking around. And when you find out that he's the last brother and that on this mission, you know, uh he does what he does at the end of issue 1. I don't want to give spoilers away for those that haven't read it, but
Sure.
what he does and what he gets to that point, it's just like, oh my god, like how. But you can relate to it because we're all adults now.
Yeah.
You can understand how he can go from that happy-go-lucky kid that's just joking around with his brothers to having nobody by his side, by being all alone, by failing at everything that he was set out to do and wanting to just call it quits. Like it's so relatable. They made it to where it is so connected to so many of us that it just makes you want to cry reading the comic. And it's just absolutely gorgeously done. Like it's some of the best work to come out in the last 20 years, hands down.
Ah, that's crazy, man. Yeah, very well said. Poet right here, man. So something I think is interesting because I was actually thinking, like, comic books have been a catalyst, or superheroes have been a catalyst for you to have joined the military?
No, no,
No.
not for
Oh
me.
yeah. Okay.
So my family is a long line of military individuals. My father served in the military. He actually served in the Iraq War just as I did. He just served in earlier years. I served in the later years. Um, my grandfather served in the Navy. My great grandfather was in the U.S. Army Air Corps. It just goes back and back and back. We can actually date our family all the way back to Spain and being a essentially a mercenary, a knight for hire, and we had the family crest and all of that stuff. So it's more of like a legacy thing. It's more of about continuing on the tradition of serving in the military. Um, my father hugely ingrained joining in the military. If if I were to tell you today if I would ever join the military, I would tell you no. But I was 18 at the time, and you know there was a war going on. it was a tradition thing. I was bored. I was working. I was 17 working as an electrician. And I was just like, I'm bored doing the same thing day in and day out. Eventually it got to the point where I was like, all right, I'm going to go join the military. What can I do? I wanted to be a sniper. What I tell the recruiter, I was like, I want to be a sniper. He's like, all right, well, you got to join the infantry and then you can go to sniper school after that. Ended up joining the infantry, ended up going to Fort Benning, Georgia, third ID, going to Iraq, never got to go to sniper school. But, yeah, it's just family that led me into the military. It wasn't necessarily anything to do with superheroes. I loved them growing up and it was a big, impactful part of my life, but me serving had everything to do with family and not necessarily with comics.
Oh, that's interesting. What's your point of view on legacy from your present moment forward?
Like what I want.
Yeah. Or what you
Um,
want, or what would you
I'm
would you
going
want
to
to go for it?
I will encourage my kids not to join the military. Not that I will be against it, but um I mean war is hell and and it sucks, but the military also sucks. there's a Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of great things, a lot of benefits, a lot of things. I wouldn't be the person I am today if I had not joined the military. Um but there was also a lot of dumb things that happened in the military and a lot of toxic leadership that just makes I've lost a lot of friends to suicide, and it's not just because they went down range. It's because you know sometimes the life of being a soldier, just working 18 hours a day, day in and day out, not seeing your family, not being able to go home, that stuff, it really runs you down. And it's not something I would want for my kids per se. If it's something that they are adamant about and they want to do, I'm 100% down for them doing it. But I would really like them to explore just everything. If the military happens to be that path, then so be it. But there's so much that this world has to offer outside of the military that you could go and investigate and see if that's what you want to do.
That's pretty legit. So this is a kind of neat question. So I'm sure you've experienced, along with like the not so good leaders, if you experience good
Yep.
leaders.
Oh yeah.
What would you say would be like for you, I guess, that what do you think are some of the better like characteristics of a leader, qualities, traits?
Um, so one of the best leaders I ever had was in Iraq. I was attached to a tank platoon because they weren't using tanks at the time. We were using armored vehicles and they didn't have enough people to have a ground element, ground force. And so my squad was attached to a tank platoon and we were their ground force. Um, and so that's when I met the first true leader was my platoon sergeant, and he was an absolutely phenomenal man. And it was because he knew how to give orders, but he knew how to do it in a respectful way. He treated you like a human being. If you talk to somebody man to man, woman to woman, man to woman, adult to adult, whatever the case may be, excuse me, then you're not going to have any problems. A good leader is usually someone that will listen to the soldiers, listen to their subordinates, whatever the case may be, and be able to help and work with them and accept criticism, be able to take ideas from other people. There's so many people in the military, or at least when I was serving, but I heard it hasn't gotten much better, that get into positions of power, and they abuse that power, and that's where things start to go over the line, and it causes it to be really hard for a lot of individuals to deal with.
That's legit, dude. Yeah, I think that that's definitely spot on. Getting good at
That's
communication.
that's how I was in communication is key. The communication is everything. I am very nowadays I am very anti-war, and I think war is it's just a failure of communication. It's a breakdown of being able to have conversation. And I think that applies across the board to everything, not just war. And communication is key. When I was in that leadership position, I always just talked to people like they were humans. Even if they were messing up and doing something wrong. Even if I had to make somebody do some push-ups, I would go make them do 10 push-ups and be like, all right, get up. Like, all right, like this is what you're doing wrong. I don't want to keep doing this. I need you to fix this, and we can come to some kind of understanding. Like, if you talk to people on a level of respect, it's going to work so much better, and it always has the best outcome. Sometimes there's those people that just want to rebel and are going to be, really just not listening to anything and not trying to have a conversation. And it's hard to break down those barriers. But for the most part, if you treat people with respect, you'll get treated with respect.
That's fair. Yeah. I think it's interesting how I recall being just uh not rejecting, but just stubborn just for the sake of being stubborn.
Yeah.
And I
Oh
think
yeah,
back on it,
definitely.
I'm like, why was I being so
Yep.
goofy?
No, I've apologized to my parents for what I was as a teenager, because I rebelled very hard. I mean, I had a lot of excuse me, I had a lot of trauma in my childhood. I was sexually abused. I was physically abused. My stepmother was an alcoholic, and so it was just a hellhole to grow up in. And my dad was either he was long distance truck driver or he was away in the military. So it was a hellish landscape to grow up in, and so I know 100% what you mean. And it's just it just makes you who you are.
That's fair. So, because I just wanted to, oh, there's a couple parts on this one. Oh, so you seem like a pretty chipper fella, a joyful fella in my short experience. How do you go from where do you find, or yeah, how do you find, or how do you go from the childhood experience into, because I find that a lot of folks are pulling their past into the present to make themselves miserable now.
Mhm.
Have you experienced that, or how have you pulled yourself out of those darker times, or
So
those kind of those that kind of thought?
so so when I am much happier now, and I'll start it off by saying on my knuckles it says amor fati.
Mm,
That's Latin for love of one's fate. Um, and it's quoted saying that it's essentially all things that have happened in your life, good or bad, were meant to happen. And it's made essentially made you the person you are. That to love all things that have happened in your life, whether they be good or bad, because it has helped form you into the human being that you are. If I had not experienced the things that I had in my life, I don't know the person that I would be. And I love the person that I am today. And so I don't know if I would want to be somebody else. And so my experiences, I don't know, some of them are very bad. Like I said, I've been sexually abused as a kid, and I dealt with a lot of childhood trauma. Um, and then having to go to Iraq and deal with all of that. That's, compacting that with childhood PTSD is what's called complex PTSD, which is from what I'm told, it's lifelong PTSD essentially. And so it's something that's always going to be there. Which is fine. I've worked past that because like I said, it's part of who I am. It's made me who I am. And uh but I found real relief when I was in Montana, and I was working with the Montana Conservation Corps. I was doing pretty much wildland firefighting job of what's called fuel reduction, cutting down some of the forest, piling it up so it can be burned in the winter. This allows for when the summertime hits, if there is a wildfire, that's not more fuel, more trees for the fire to burn up, and they have a possibility of stopping it easier. So we were doing that all summer, all over the national parks throughout all of Montana, and that place really changed my perspective on life. I don't know. I can't say what it was necessarily, if it was just the whole experience itself, but you really are humbled when you are in mountains that you can just see down into the valleys, and they are just going down so far. And it's they call Montana big sky country. You're from Canada, so I'm sure that you know what I'm talking about, just from being in the higher area of the continent. And so watching the mountains just go on for as far as the eye can see, and the sky is so wide and open, it's just the most absolutely devastating, beautifully thing I've ever seen. Absolutely gorgeous. It's just words are simply not enough to describe it. I took pictures of this event or when I was there, and it just doesn't do it justice. Like, you have to see those mountains for yourself to be able to understand the true magnificent. I can't say it right.
Magnificence. Wait, yeah.
Magnificence. Thank you.
Yeah.
Magnificence of those mountains, and it kind of healed me in a way. And I'm not, my wife is super hippie, her mom's super hippie. I'm not a super hippie individual, but I do smoke weed and do all that stuff. I love shrooms, but I don't like to think that mountains changed me per se. It's the perspective that I was given while I was there that really changed me, and I just felt back to myself for the first time in a long time. And that's where my life really began to change. And from there on out, I took on the amorphity perspective, and I have been living it ever since. I control what I can, and I let go of what I can't. That's the simplest way to do things. Like, if I can't control it, why am I going to let it bother me? I can't control it. I can't do anything about it. I'm not going to give myself a headache over it. If I can control it, I'll fix it to the best of my ability, and I'll continue to work on it until it is fixed. And once it's good, it's good. And that's how I'm my both mine and my wife's credit score, when we first met 5 6 years ago, was absolutely horrible. It's above 750 now, and it's just because my credit was bad. I filed for bankruptcy at 21. I had gotten a DUI, flipped my car 3 times, and almost died at 23. 25s, my 20s were were a struggle. I had some beater up cars. I was living in some trap hole places that had holes in the floor. Like, it was a struggle, but I built myself back up slowly. And then now I finally got to a place where I have a little bit of financial freedom. All my bills are completely caught up. I'm financially everything's taken care of, and me and my wife can go do small things and just enjoy life. And I think that's all I've ever strived for. It's just to have that, we can go to a couple concerts a year. We can maybe go to Vegas and have a good time and live our lives, and I've built that, and it's taken a while. It's taken a while. I'm about to be 33, and it's taken me a while to build that life because I messed up so much in my 20s just with relationships and spending too much money, especially when I was in the military. I was just spending money like I had it, but I didn't, you know? And so, it took a lot, but that trip to Montana really changed my perspective on life. And from that moment on, I really started to build my future that I wanted to have.
Ryan Holiday has a book. It's called Stillness is Key, I believe. Yeah, Stillness is the Key. So when we were chatting about it before, I thought, oh, I forgot about the book until you actually said now. So I guess it's actually now. But Stillness is the Key is like, when I read that, I became more aware. I'm like a pretty chill person as is, but I became more aware of like noise and
Yes.
just like shit coming in, And I realized like how much how simple of a thing it is just to like sit in stillness, but it's so hard at the same time. But I think once you get past that really, really hard part where it's like an inner chill, I'm not gonna say peace, but at least you have better mental fitness where it's
Yes.
like sometimes you're not going to be able to lift as hard. Some days you're going to lift fucking a new PR in the gym, but then it's like it like goes along with it.
Yeah.
And I think when we get to like chill and we're just like sitting and chilling and we're actually listening to our thoughts, it gives us an opportunity to like challenge those thoughts too.
Yeah, that's that's one thing. I've always been a very deep thinker. So I've always thought very hardly on every. And there's one thing that always stuck with me that I was told by a commanding officer one time, because when you're in Iraq and stuff like that, and you have to do guard duty, you're sitting up in a tower or at a post, and you're just staring off into the nothingness for hours at a time. We calculated it was about 3 months that we spent in guard towers. And they said that the saying goes that you're going to spend enough time in there that you're going to become a philosopher, because you're going to have nothing but time to think. And that's exactly what it is it's having the time to finally think about all of these things. And the more you think about it, the more you start to change as a person. And that's one of my I love honestly I love thinking, like I love especially deep thinking and really getting to the root of who I am, because that's what I used to be. A very huge narcissist. I had a lot of issues and mental health issues and things of that nature, and I was just not a great person, especially in my early 20s. I was just wild and out, and it took a lot of just looking inward and seeing the person that I was, and it was like, man, like I know this stuff is wrong and I shouldn't be doing it. I want to change it because I'm tired of being this person. I'm tired of the consequences that come with being this person. And I want to do something different. And if you talk to my wife, she'll tell you the same thing. When me and her first met, I was still that person, back in 2016, 17. And it took me a while, but it wasn't until I hit like it was 2019 or so that I really started to change as a person and become better.
That's pretty sweet. Was there like a pivot point? Was there an experience that was that where you look back and you're like, "Ooh, yeah, that was the turning
Um,
point."
yeah, it was definitely a girl.
Fair enough.
um,
Yeah.
Before my wife and I got married, we were together for
Mm.
a while. And then her and I had split up, and I went to date somebody else, and she was just absolutely the worst for me. Maybe someone else out there will be happy, but I was not in that relationship, and it got to the point where I was like, all right, like I'm done. Like I'm done playing these games. I'm done being this person. I'm done being all of this. Like I want to be a good person and I want to put good out into the world. And so I'm going to start doing that. And that's really, from then on, I've gotten a lot better. My wife tells me all the time that, she's like, you're such a better individual, a better person now. You're so more helpful now. It's just like, because I just got like, there's no room for all that hate, you know what I mean? For all the anger and causing drama and hostility. It's exhausting. It is exhausting to live in that life. I mean, like me and my wife, we live such a peaceful life now. And we talk about it all the time. It's just like, man, this is so relaxing. We're just chilling, watching TV, smoking a blunt. Like you can't ask for more than that.
It's funny that you say that. Kendra and I have been reflecting on our days like more often, and it's been
Mm-hmm.
very similar. Like
Yeah.
I find like I resonate a lot. There's a lot of parallels, which is kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
We went to go see my parents 2 years ago. No, 1 year ago. It was 1 year
Mm-hmm.
ago. They were down in Florida, and we are going to do a road trip with them. And it was
Nice.
really cool. So it was an awesome experience. It was freaking phenomenal. We had a cool system down and everything. It was sweet. So there was this one day I was like coming out of the RV, and I just heard my mom say my name, or they were
Mm-hmm.
just talking about me. I'm like, "Oh, you talking about me?" Like joking, just like whatever. And she's like, "Yeah." We were just talking about how adult Kyle is so much better than teenage Kyle.
Yep.
And I'm like, yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Just took me a while to grow up.
Yeah, totally. Oh man. I think it's so interesting because it's like I found where because I always like growth, but I think
Mm-hmm.
when I really like put the 2 feet in, where I was like any times I have noticed that my life has become because it's not like a one time thing, but I've
Mm-hmm.
noticed very key points in my life where my quality of existence has
Mm-hmm.
substantially like increased.
Yep.
And I've been recognizing like a lot more folks are just getting better.
Yes.
Like I think I'm just like brainwashing myself just to see good vibes because I'm just
Mhm.
like, all right, now you're intruding in my
Yeah.
shit. I don't like that. No. But it's like maybe I'm just like purposefully doing it, but I'm definitely feeling like there's a big vibe in like more creative people just
Yes.
doing bigger things. Like your YouTube channel, I started a podcast. I think I'm relatively creative. And then there's so many other peeps that are just cranking it out with the creativity.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it is, man. Do you have any
And
theories?
I mean, it does. I mean, it helps that we're in the era of creativity. Um, my daughters, my oldest daughter is 13, the other one's 12, and they you know they talk about it all the time. They want to make TikToks and they want to do YouTube channels and things of that nature. Granted, it's what's popular, it's what they see all the time. They want to be an influencer, they want people to see them and stuff of that nature, which has its pros and cons, depending on how you look at it. But at the end of the day, we're 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 really getting to a new generation to where they can just be themselves. They don't have to worry necessarily about having to go get a job to make sure that you get married and have kids. Not that that's a bad thing, but we're having a generation that can come up and discover themselves in a way that we couldn't ever before. And it's because of things like the internet and being able to connect in so many different ways and so many different platforms that are doing it. And this is only going to continue to advance and get more interconnected. There's always the pros and cons to everything, but I see it as a good thing because we're going to see more creators being birthed every year with technology advancing as far as it's going. I think it's going to be a much bigger industry than it already is, and it's absolutely phenomenal. There's there's so many. I remember Joe Rogan saying something about like there being like 100,000 or 100 million podcasts out there or something like that. Like this is the era of learning what we're going to do with all of this. And podcasts obviously has a huge significant impact in that.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I just wrote it down here. It is the digital renaissance for the
Mhm.
value creator.
Yes. 100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Man, I totally agree with you where it's going to be like a hockey stick. Like
Hmm.
we're just like going and then there's going to be a huge spike. And I don't know what it's called. I know that there's a specific word for it, but it's the time where it's like just before shit gets real.
Yep.
So like when computers first started and they were going, then there was a huge spike and
Hmm.
people kind of got in there like just before. And I totally think, oh, shit, man, like I totally think with AI basically being able to be an assistant,
Hmm.
I'm this is something that's crazy. So I'm gonna take a clip out of this that's probably 3 to 6 minutes long,
Hmm.
pop it into YouTube, copy the transcription, which I'm not even gonna do myself,
Hmm.
put it into the chat GBT, give me 10 YouTube titles. And then it's just
Yeah.
like boom. It's
Yeah.
like, what?
And that this
10
is the
YouTube
big
and
and that's just the beginning. That's
yeah,
just the beginning.
man,
It's
it's
just the start of it.
crazy.
I honestly I can't even conceive what it's going to look like in 20 years. And then we're going to add robotics into the mix. Who knows what we're going to have? Who knows what we're going to have? I'm personally excited for it. I've been telling my wife like the minute that we get like deep dive VR like Sword Art Online, you ever watch that anime?
Yeah.
Yeah, like Sword Art Online where you go deep dive into the game, or like Ready Player One. Like
Yeah.
I'm going in and I'm gonna stay in there. Like you can hook an IV up to me and I'm gonna live in that reality forever.
Is that crazy? Yeah, man. I actually was saying to my buddy earlier where because I think our environment's evolving way faster than we are. Like we're
Hmm.
still basically the same biomechanical meat bags that we've
Yeah.
been for the last bajillion years, right?
Yep.
So it's kind of crazy thinking about how all of this stuff is coming in and the like everything is going to make things simple,
Hmm.
but I think that could be to the detriment of if people are not actively sitting in stillness and thinking
Yes.
that they're it's kind of like how my grandparents unreal at math,
Hmm.
right? My grandma, I could message her and be like, what is this? And then she would just get the number. Ask me, I'm going to whip out the calculator.
Hmm.
Pretty simple. The generation that's 20 years from now, if they're not mindful, they're going to outsource their thinking,
Hmm.
and then it's not going to then that's not going to go very well. So
Yeah.
I think like I think it's when I think more people, and this is one thing that I'm thinking, this is me being like preachy, is I think being practicing that mindfulness and just like chilling, and it could be any way, shape, and or form, it doesn't even matter, but just getting something in there,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where you can just kind of like, okay, I can sit in my thoughts, organize it, and then freaking deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you do for that one? How do you just like go chill?
Yeah. Most of the time I'm by myself. I get my kids for visitation and in summer and things of that nature, but rest of the months I'm mostly by myself. My wife goes to work, so I hang out and play League of Legends. I'm a sucker for like How I Met Your Mother, and I have like 6 other shows that I have on a loop that I go through each of the seasons, and I'll watch them all the way through. But I don't really do much. Occasionally I'll go on a walk and something like that, or I'll just smoke a blunt, and sometimes I'll go sit on the porch. But I don't really I don't feel a need for really doing much of it. I do a lot of self-reflection. And so I look inward a lot and think about how I'm doing things, if I'm doing them, good. Should I be doing things better? Especially when it comes to the YouTube channel. Like there's, days where I won't put out 3 videos. And internally in my mind, I'm just beating myself up.
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
I know I should be out. I know that I could get up and go do the videos, but I feel like I just don't want to do it today. You know what I mean? I'm just being lazy. I'm unmotivated. I'm just bullshitting around pretty much. And so I know I should be getting up and doing it. So it's a lot of for me, it's just a lot of self-reflection. But again, I have a different life than a lot of people. I don't go out and socialize with anybody or do anything like that. And that originally started because of PTSD and things of that nature. I didn't like really being in crowds and I didn't really going out much. And if I did go out, it had to be like a set schedule of I'm going to the gas station, I'm going to Walmart, and then I'm coming right home. And if there's anything that stops that, I'm absolutely freaking out about it. And I got to a point where that's not necessarily happening anymore, but um I still like I my comfort is just hanging out at home, occasionally going over to my buddy's house that I served with. He lives down the road. I have a few other friends, maybe take my dog to the park. But to like I said, occasionally a couple times a year go to a concert with my wife, and then for the rest of the time I'm hanging out by myself, so it's lots of time to think by myself. I listen to lots of podcasts. I listen to funny ones. I listen to Joe Rogan. I listen to Lex Friedman. Um, uh, I'm a Democrat, so I don't listen to Democratic podcasts usually. I listen to center or right leaning podcasts. I listen to Ben Shapiro, Matt Walsh, just because I want to hear the perspective that I don't have. And I usually disagree with most of what they are saying. You can catch me yelling at Ben Shapiro because there's sometimes I can't do it. But I'm yelling at my TV, obviously. My wife always gets mad at me and laughs at me. But so yeah, I do. I just I research the things that are interesting to me. I reflect on them. I have a lot of time by myself, so I think that's what makes it a little bit different for me to not necessarily have to go off and do something to be able to get into that spot.
that's totally legit. Because yeah, now you like put it down that way. Just general populations, I suppose, would go to their job. They're spending time with people. Then
Yep.
they're spending more time with people because of the social outings. And
Yep.
then they're spending even more time with people, but in a digital format. And
Yep.
then they're spending more time with other people. And then the only time that they actually like get time with themselves often, if they got like a really hectic lifestyle,
Mm-hmm.
is before they go to bed. And then
Yep.
we're usually on our phones before bed.
Yep. 100%.
Oh man, yeah, that's fair. Now that because reflecting on it for myself too, I do a lot of walking. Like I'm standing right now, which helps with
Do
energy and
you have
stuff.
a standing desk? My wife keeps on telling me to get one of those.
I would recommend it. Yeah,
Yeah.
Kendra got me one for I believe it was Christmas or my birthday. I think it was Christmas. But yeah, it's pretty sweet. Like it's comfy. It's like small. It rolls. It's good, man.
That's so
But I do a lot of walking. Like
nice.
I just go walking and then I'll just listen to podcasts or maybe I'll just walk in silence.
Yep.
And I call it a white noise walk if I'm feeling really wound up. And then
Yep.
I just need to like freaking. I think it's. What are your thoughts on this? I think I'm just observing my own self reflection and behavior now. But do you think folks are scared of just like pivoting and taking a look at that beast?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Why would you want to face that? Because it's facing everything that you've done wrong. There's guilt that lies behind that. There's sadness that lies behind that. There's a lot of emotions that you just don't want to face. And it's hard. It's easier to be that way sometimes. You know what I mean? Especially if you're getting what you want out of it, especially if it's benefiting you, that can be addictive. Yeah, I know it definitely was for me, especially getting what I wanted when I wanted. Like it's too easy. It's like taking candy from a baby. So when when you stop doing that, it's not everybody has to cognitively think to stop doing that, but like I said, I was pretty narcissistic, so I had to cognitively make the decision that I'm going to stop being this way, even though I could manipulate the situation, whatever it may be, into my liking. Um, and so it's just really it's I don't know, man. It's a difficult situation, but I did want to say that one of the things I think where I get the most thinking done is in a car ride. Especially I go pick up my kids that live in Florida, and so that's an 18-hour drive. That's one of my favorite times of the year because, like you said, it's white noise. I may play some music that I've listened to 1,000 times over since 2003, and then and I'll just
What is it gonna be? My Chemical Romance?
My Chemical Romance, Taking
Yeah.
Back Sunday, Billy
Yes.
Talent, all of it.
Yeah.
Um, and so I'll just zone out and I'll just be in such deep thought the entire time. I can't tell you how many things I have thought about on those car rides. It have been just like I should probably write some of this down and never do.
Voice memos. Those would do
Yeah.
it. Uh, okay, I got a quick. So, is there? I guess in general. Originally, I was like for the car ride, but I
Mhm.
guess more so in general because you mentioned that you wrote poetry as well.
Yes.
Is there a piece of poetry that you can remember off the top of your head where even you're like, "Fuck, that's fucking good"?
Nope.
No,
I cannot remember a single thing that I have ever wrote.
fair enough.
I can't. To be fair, I haven't wrote anything in probably like 2 years. But prior to that, I was writing a lot. I used to have a whole notebook full of stuff, and it would just be stuff. Usually, the inspiration came from listening to emo bands and stuff like that. And I of course, it's going to be a little bit darker poetry or darker love poetry or something of that nature. I've always been a helpless romantic, which made it very hard to be a narcissist as well. Uh, um, but
Oh.
I grew up when we grew up in the 90s. It was everywhere. Bump into a girl at a coffee shop. I was just talking to my wife about this the other day about bumping into a girl at a coffee shop and then falling madly in love and blah 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 blah. I was like, that's just not something that ever happened, nor that will it ever happen. Like, but in my mind, that because I never had any like strong relationship to look up to growing up. My parents were split at an early age. My mom left when I was 4. My stepmom was an alcoholic. Their relationship was absolutely horrible. And so growing up, I never had a relationship that I could look to that was healthy and happy. And so it took me a long time to actually learn or unlearn everything that I learned what was a relationship that wasn't in the movies.
Nice. That's such a great self-reflection, dude.
Yeah.
What got you? Oh yeah, I guess it was your time in Montana that really started getting you thinking on your stuff, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I almost doubled up my questions on that one. Oof.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm glad I remembered.
Prior to Montana, I was just like everything was loaded up on me, and I at many points I was suicidal and thinking about just calling it quits. And it was after that that I took on the mentality that whatever comes at me, I'm gonna be able to overcome. I've been able to overcome Iraq. I was able to be an infantryman. I was able to do all of that. Like I've proved to myself that I can be the baddest motherfucker on the fucking face of this earth, and I'm gonna keep doing that. I'm gonna keep being that person.
Sick. It's like I like the I like the idea of well, yeah, I imagine that we probably share a lot of similar philosophies on this kind of stuff. But thinking of uh it's like the Japanese proverb where it's the warrior in a garden rather than the gardener in a
Yes,
war.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. I think about that. I actually think about that proverb all the time because I do feel like it sucks that people have to be a warrior. I don't like, it sucks that we live in a world and it's human nature. I get it, but it sucks that people have to be able to go to that violence. It
Mhm.
sucks. It's not good, and I don't like it. And everything about war, I just after everything I've seen in Iraq and everything, like, don't get me wrong, we did do a lot of helping in Iraq, but a lot of it was caused because of the war efforts that were happening. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's so
And
true.
it just nobody wins. Like we lost so many friends and family to these wars, and in the Iraqi death toll, I think, was closer to 1 million civilian lives lost during the course of the years of the war.
Shit.
So it's just nobody wins. And what happened at the end of the day? Nothing happened except we overthrew a dictator, and now the Taliban is in charge, like, or ISIS or whatever terrorist organization has a control of government right now. I can't remember. But
Fair.
regardless, nothing changed of it, and lives were lost for absolutely no reason. And it's just sad. It's sad, and I'm not saying not every war, there are reasons to fight a just war, but rarely is there ever a just war.
That's legit, dude. Damn, that's a good one. I like the idea of Bedros Keuilian. He's an entrepreneur. He says to be a savage servant,
Yep.
like be
Yep.
capable and competent, but to serve.
Yep.
Right? It's
And
kind of cool.
I was actually talking with my dad the other day because, like, again, my dad is a very, very Southern Texan macho kind of man. Grew up cowboy and all that good stuff. So we were talking the other day because we obviously come from military backgrounds, the whole family. So he's got a complex with that. That we come from warriors, blah 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 blah, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
But we were talking the other day about these programs that are essentially putting people through like a civilian version of boot camp. And it's not like Tough Mud or anything like that. It's actually like way more advanced, but it's essentially testing people's abilities and their mental capabilities, and
Hmm.
physically and mentally, and just showing them that they can push past what they are at. And it was really hard for me to grasp the concept that people are out there paying for that when I joined the military at barely 18 years old and did that. And I learned that early on. So it was a hard concept for me to think that there are people that are like, 35, 40 years old that haven't experienced anything challenging enough in their life that they have the need to go and do that. But I think that's a thing that we're definitely missing in today's society is, it's not necessarily toxic masculinity to go out there and want to feel masculine. You know what I mean? And I feel
Totally.
like that's what these guys are doing is they want to feel some kind of masculinity, and they were never given that, whether they grew up in the city their entire lives or and so they never experienced anything that could be considered by societal standards as manly or things of that nature. And they want that feeling, and so they go to these programs. But it's crazy to think that you know that that's something that's needed out there.
Totally.
And it's
I completely there. Michael Easter wrote a book called Comfort Crisis.
yeah,
We're in a comfort crisis.
yeah,
And like
yeah, we
actually I
are.
would be able to say like when I did the Tough Mudder, that
Yeah,
was
because
like 100% how you described it.
yep,
Totally.
because people are afraid to break the comfort zone. That's
Yeah.
one thing they press into you in basic training is breaking that comfort zone. Once you break past that comfort zone and you get past it, you realize, oh shit, like I can do this. I can really do this. And I got to the point where, like, I did a 12-mile ruck march with I think it was like a 35 or 40 pound pack, and it was 12 miles. I did it in 2 hours and 55 minutes. Time
Nice.
limit was 3 hours, so I barely made it. But something like that I would have never conceived I was able or capable of doing. I really was able to see how far I could push my body and push my mind even when I'm just tired. I'm sagging, I'm sweating, I'm just like ready to pass out. And I learn where I can push my body. And you learn that you're not fragile. You learn that you're capable of so much more than you give yourself credit for. And I wish that we could instill this in people without having to put them through some kind of like boot camp. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Something that actually just whoops people's asses. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I totally agree because it just helps it when you I think how to go. Anyways, when you just reach that new level of discomfort, like each new level with discomfort, then you're actually able to like you have a new baseline of how to go about that. Then everything below that baseline of discomfort is all good. Like it's not even that comparatively, it's not that bad.
Yep.
So then it's a lot easier to just it's like something that you viewed to be so difficult before becomes
Yep.
easier now. It's
And
like
that's actually why I talked earlier about like the more fatigue and everything like that, and everything that I've endured in my past has made me who I am. If I hadn't endured these things, what would be my threshold of not being able to tolerate things? I feel bad sometimes because like there's a lot of, I was raped as a kid and stuff like that by an older stepbrother, and it was really hard to come to terms with it. It was hard to talk about it. I didn't talk about it until I was like 25 years old. I used to have nightmares about it and things of that nature. But I eventually got to a point where I was able to talk about it openly. It had a lot to do with the Me Too movement, actually, which I was actually a lot of people aren't happy about the Me Too movement, at least my father and people that are in the South. And not a lot of people are thrilled about it, but it really helped me. And I think it was a great movement. But it was really hard to overcome all of those things. And so I eventually did the amorphity. I got that concept drilled into my head, and it really helped push me forward. And like I said, like there's a lot of people that struggle, and they're still like dealing with the trauma day in and day out, and I don't deal with it as much, and I feel guilty about that sometimes, like,
mm,
or I feel like there's maybe something wrong with me because I've endured so much trauma, yet I can keep a more positive outlook. Like I was even talking to my wife the other day because I look at death. I just it's hard for me to empathize when it comes to death, and I was just like, yeah, it sucks. Like death happens, you know what I mean? Like
I
and
get
so
it.
for me, yeah, and so I'm like it's really like it's a bummer. Like I feel you. Like I'll give you a hug, but like it's just I'm not gonna break down and start crying or anything. You know what I mean? And it's just like it's hard to really put it into words, but it's just like I found a way to find some kind of peace with everything that's happened in my life. But like I want to get back to like because I like to ramble.
No, I thought
Um,
that but on that note of what you're just saying there, I think something where you mentioned that you felt guilty.
yeah.
I think I think that showing or speaking about your experience
Hmm.
is a great just indicator of the possibilities of an individual
Yeah.
because nothing between you and myself, we're made up of the same carbon, nitrogen, hydrogen, and I forget one of the other ones. I think there's one more. But anyways, we're all made up of the same thing. The only thing that separates us is the consciousness.
Yeah.
And like
And the
multiple people have experienced similar things.
Yep.
So it's like the interesting thing where if it's 100 people experience a past trauma, you're going
Hmm.
to get 100 different futures.
Yep.
No
Yep.
one future is the same.
Yep.
Yeah.
And people process trauma in so many different ways. And that's why I find I'm glad I am the person I am today. And I've able to overcome all of that trauma that I've endured. It was not easy. It was hard for a long time. I struggled with it for a long time. Um, but eventually I just got to a point where I wasn't gonna let it control every aspect of my life anymore. You know what I mean? I wasn't gonna let it sit on my mind. There's occasionally times where it'll pop into my mind here and there, and it kind of rubs me the wrong way, but for the most part, it is what it is. Like I can't change. Like I said before, I can't change what I can't change, and that's part of my past. I can't change it. What am I gonna do about it? I can sit here and wallow in the sorrow and be sad for myself, or I can go out there and talk about it and help other men talk about their trauma. Because that's one thing I'm a huge advocate of. I actually work with a program. It's called 1in6.org, and it's talking about 1 in 6 men who are sexually abused in the United States on average when they're children. Um,
I actually thought it was 1 in 3.
Now it's 1 in 4 for girls and 1 in 6 for boys
Gotcha.
in the United States, at least. Um, And so, I like to be an advocate. And when I actually started talking about it, I had a significant amount of people that I personally know that would private message me and tell me that this also happened to me by so and so. And it was astounding the amount of people that something like that actually happens to. And that helped put a little perspective on it for me too, is that I'm not dealing with this necessarily alone. There's 40 million children in America that are also dealing with this. And so
Absolutely.
that helped a little bit, and it just made me want to get out there more and talk about it and let people know, like, start checking your uncles and your brothers and all of these people that you think are close, because it's usually family that are the perpetrators of said actions. And so being an advocate and doing things like that, living, a better life, living by amorphity, all these things combined have helped me have a better perspective on life and be able to take that past trauma and not let it really weigh me down.
Nice. I like how you say not let it weigh you down.
Mm-hmm.
That's good. It's I like the phrasing of it because it puts the power in your hands, you know? I
Yep.
think it's like the difference between can't and won't. It's
Yes.
not that someone can't do it, it's that they won't do it.
Yes.
And I always say that for peeps is like, no, 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 switch it up. And
Yep.
they're like, oh, that sounds harsh. But it may sound harsh, but at least if you say won't instead of can't, then
Mm-hmm.
it like you put the ball in your court.
Yep. That's why I
Which
tell everybody, the power is always in your hands. You have the capability to do anything you want. Do it.
Mhm.
You are the one that's stopping you. You're the only person stopping you.
And
And
if you
it
don't
took
know
me a
how
long.
to, YouTube it.
Yeah, you can literally learn, but you're the only person stopping you. You're the only one that can make yourself go forward. So it's time to start doing it. And the thing is, most people know what they need to do. It's just that they may be too scared to do it. I was actually I had worked a job that actually taught me something that I never thought I would learn from this job. I used to I was an electrician for a while. I did security systems for a while down in Florida. When I moved to Texas, I'd gotten a temporary job doing sales for Vivint Security. It's like security systems in America that really just go out everywhere. But I was doing sales for them inside of a Best Buy, and during the training, they first of all, it was a real cult mentality. It was like, oh my, like they came in there just pumped every single day, like, we're gonna get sales, we're gonna get sales, we're gonna get sales. And like, you can't accept failure, can't accept failure. But aside from all of the crazy cult like mentality, the biggest thing I took away from them is that you are afraid of success, that you can be afraid of success, that you have had success for before, you have tasted it and you're afraid to fall, or that you know what success will be like and you are afraid to have the fall, so you're afraid to even go after it. And that's something that stuck with me for a long time, because I don't know if I've ever necessarily been afraid of success, but now I'm mentally aware that that's a possibility, that I could be afraid of success. And so now I keep a vigilant eye if that ever does arrive, that I'm thinking if I'm stopping myself from being more successful because I'm afraid that it might collapse on me. And so I make sure that I keep that in check. But I've always been a fan of that little saying.
Well, I usually like to keep conversations going until they can, but I don't think that there's anything past that point right there. That fire just dropping bars. Jeez, man. Okay. That was absolutely fantastic, brother.
Thanks.
So I got two questions that I
Yeah.
always end this podcast with. Okay. I could have told
Yep.
you about them before, but I forgot to. So, first question, and you dropped a lot of fucking knowledge bombs today, dude. So I'm very, very intrigued by whether you come up with a new one or if you just use one that you already mentioned. But the first one, I'm going to set the context for you. You lived a long life. You're on your deathbed. The people around you that you love are around you. None of your whole YouTube, all 30,000, correct?
Yeah.
All 30,000 subscribers. You don't see, none of them see anything, all of your content's gone. You have one piece of advice that you can pass on. What would that be?
One piece of advice. Amorphity. That morphity. It's the simplest way. It's the simplest. It's the best thing because your mental health is what matters the most. I think. Like you can't be or do anything unless you're mentally right. And there's so many people in the world that go through so much trauma at an early age and even into adulthood and continue into the cycles of trauma, whether it be parental or something else. And so to be able to live by that mentality, I truly believe that somebody can reach some kind of peace in their life and some kind of happiness.
That is awesome. And then I just want to write down a quick note there because I had a cool idea. I'll tell you about it afterwards.
Okay.
But final question. How would you define living a limitless life? What does a limitless life mean to you?
In the terms that the life is limitless and financially or just everything?
Everything. Like if
Okay.
to live a fulfilling life.
Okay. For me, a fulfilling life would honestly just be a cabin in the woods of Montana. Uh, have a little bit of electric going on because I don't want to not have electricity. But have a little cabin, have a little bit of peace, watch the snow come down. Like that's the simple. That's I talk to my wife about it all the time. Like that's I don't know if it'll ever become a reality. She's more likely to. She's Cajun, so she wants to go back Louisiana wise and go into the bayous, gators and all that good stuff, which I don't necessarily hate. The Cajun food is absolutely delicious, but if I were to have my way, I've been wanting to get back to Montana ever since I went all those years ago. And if I could, I would retire in those mountains and live out my life on a cabin and just live with me and my wife and live my life there. That's ideal fulfillment for me.
Nice. I like that, dude. Yeah, man, gotta live that joyous gratitude of life.
Yep.
All right, folks, that's what I've got for you this episode. It was a pretty awesome one. Where can people find you, Bryan?
You can check me out on YouTube at Comic Breakdown. You can check me out on Instagram at comic_breakdown. I'm also on Twitter, which I think is at Breakdown Comic, and then also on Facebook. But if you really want to check out my content, just check out the YouTube channel. That's where I'm constantly posting probably 15 to 22 videos a week. That way you guys are getting caught up on everything that is coming out that's new.
All right, folks. So if you've loved today's episode, please do me a favor right now. Share it on your Instagram stories and tag me with my handle at Warrior Body Kyle, along with at comic_breakdown. That is one of the ways that we grow. And until next time, I hope your day treats you as good as you look.